these are due to and structures that we have for many organizations, structures that are not able to help us to diagnose issues before they occur. We have poor internal audits, a number of organizations. We have fraud cases all over the place with corruption that we deal with on a day-to-day basis. And this is not just confined to this region. I think this is all over the world. The area around having unqualified board members who cannot contribute effectively and cannot offer oversight is still an issue. Unethical leadership is something that we deal with, again, on a daily basis. And these are things that have necessitated board evaluations and governance audit, so that we can assure stakeholders that things are being done in the right manner. And the entire basis for governance is really about looking at systems and processes that enable us to be effective in the way organizations operate, looking at the overall direction, but also the climate, issues around culture, issues around behavior, transparency. These are really, really important. Issues increasingly around safeguarding. How do we deal with vulnerabilities? How do we deal with sustainability? How do we deal with privacy? We've seen, data protection laws in place in many places. And for many, the board role and responsibilities may mean different things, but there's a convergence. What we all agree on is when you think about a board, then you must think about fiduciary duties, what the best interest of the organization, that you must think about strategy in some of the sectors. Management development is a very key area. Oversight, being able to provide oversight, ensuring that as a board you are leading the organization strategically, you are ensuring the financial future of that organization, you are a good ambassador for the organization, and you are able to ensure that those that you have delegated the leadership to are performing in the best way possible within the interest of the organization, particularly in regard to their mission and vision. These are important elements. And one of the things, when you look at governance model, there are areas that have been emphasized, especially when you're looking at the audits. So in terms of structure, how is the governance structure? How is the board size? Are there terms of office? And there are some boards that people have been there forever. Are there limits? How is the representation like? Do we have committees? And how are those committees aligned to the mission, vision, and strategy of that company? What are the sizes? Are there advisories as well? If it's a much bigger organization, are we looking at representation? How important is that? And then the processes, are we developing leadership at all levels of the organization? So succession planning is critical, but so is how you recruit, appoint board members, the nature and level of diversity. How do you induct them to be able to do that which they are promising to do as directors? Issues of remuneration. Now, these are very, very critical issues. And especially when we begin now to look at what are the changes that are taking place in our environment. With regard to meetings, again, very, very important areas for consideration. And indeed, when we do board evaluations and governance audit, some of these are the things that we assess. If you're looking at meetings, are they frequent and aligned to the constitutive documents that you have? Is the duration allowing for proper reflections on the agenda items? Are directors prepared to be able to offer the necessary skills? These are critical. Is there...
Sim, 3 weeks.
Okay, someone is asking a question or someone is making a comment?
There was someone who had not muted the microphone.
Oh, okay, that's okay. And then the issue around behaviors, again, very, very critical part of looking at, governance model. When you have members that have been brought, is there a good level of openness and trust? How is that cultivated? Strategic focus, particularly if you are looking at the different components within the organizations. There are issues of conflicts and how they are addressed. So different models, but this is just a guidance that will give you an idea of when you think about governance audit, what are those important elements that you need? And as IOD, you will see that board evaluation has actually been designed to look at the effectiveness of carrying those board responsibilities. And these are aligned to elements of good corporate governance. So you're looking at commitment, you're looking at the structure, the functioning of the board. Again, you will see some of those are already covered in the governance model, whether you're looking at the composition, the skills diversity, you're looking at engagement and management, you're looking at the environment around which organizations operate. And so issues around audit, risk, oversight are very, very important. You're looking at your stakeholders. Who are they? And how are you taking care of their interests? Again, very important. And I'm sure for a number of you who have been able to be involved in board evaluations and governance audit, you will have some good stories to tell, particularly with regard to the benefits or the improvement for the organizations, or sometimes prevention of multi-practices. So these are quite important. And, I would love, at the end of this, just to hear from a number of you, whether you have seen tangible benefits from board evaluations and governance audits, whether you feel there are areas that could be done better, whether you feel there are areas that should be reviewed, especially in view of the trends. But when you think about the trends, we have Russell and Reynolds, who are leadership researchers, and they've done quite some good work in this. And I wanted to point out 3 key areas that they have brought out in terms of governance trends. And one of it is actually skepticism about board quality. As we look forward, there is increasing demand for boards to prove that they're effective, that actually they are there for a purpose. Okay, and because of that, we will have to relook at how are we doing board evaluations? How are we looking at the processes? Are they rigorous enough? You're not just doing them to rubber stamp what a board is doing, but critically looking at the board functions vis-a-vis the direction, the overall direction of the organization. In the US, there is more demand for assertive approach, particularly looking at the qualifications of directors and whether these are public, people who can be entrusted with responsibilities. You'll find in Brazil, the issue of gender diversity is becoming more critical. And so ways of appointing and recruiting board members is an area of concern for many companies there. In India, again, when you look at the non-executive directors and you look at the way the companies are structured, that's becoming a key. And we need to think about Africa. We have quite a number of struggles. We have boards, and recognizing that there are a number of companies that are family-based. We have boards that are struggling because of the way people are brought on board and therefore the nature of discussions that happen at board level. So this is one of the very global trends when it comes to board quality. What are they delivering? How are the discussions being carried out? But the next thing is about ESG programs, which is a very, very critical area. You know, we're looking at environment, we're looking at social and governance. This has become such an agenda that is increasingly becoming within the discussions of the board. And so when you look at different organizations, the issue of how are we addressing sustainability issues and how are we reporting against those. The Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive now within the European Union has been setting standards. And we, even as a region here, as a country, need to think about how do we harmonize our standards. I'm sure IOD will have a lot to say on that because there are a number of efforts going towards that. So sustainability and corporate social responsibility, together with looking at the mission for companies, whether it's for profit or for non-profit, are going to be intertwined. There are things that we cannot forget about. And you cannot talk about ESG without thinking about the climate agenda. And within the context of the board, therefore, it's about what skills do you need in your boardroom to be able to help you with that. What are the human capital issues that are important? India is increasingly recognizing that, and now it's becoming the most populous nation in the world. And so Africa, we must follow suit, because when you look at ESG issues, we are probably the most affected. And the other issue is about CEOs. Where we are headed, we must be sure that CEOs are doing that which they are supposed to do. When you look at what has happened within the world, the economic distress, the turbulent markets due to Ukraine or post-COVID, all these issues, it's about, are we delivering? And this is across different geographies. And are we ensuring that we have proper oversight? The world over, we can see a lot of oversized payouts and excessive bonuses, even when companies are making losses. And there's going to be harsher spotlight on such compensation. We must think through this. If you look at the US and Singapore, again, the issues of ESG are becoming quite an agenda items. But it is also important to recognize that, previously we've been talking about VUCA environment, the vulnerabilities, the uncertainties, the complexities, and the ambiguities. But increasingly now we are talking about the BANI environment. Things are no longer the same. We need to get through things very fast. Decisions must be made fast. Things are changing. You look at things being fragile, and so even companies are fragile. How do we develop enough resilience to be able to handle that? And because of that, we have leadership, we have directors, we have staff who are anxious. How do we build in empathy around that? Nothing is linear anymore. How do we promote adaptability? How do we ensure that things that we don't understand, things that are not comprehensible, we are able to bring in a level of transparency, being able to make decisions with that which knowledge that we have. These are going to be important. And that is happening while we're also seeing increasing scrutiny by regulatory bodies. Are we having organizations operate within the law? And are they agents of change? Are they making a difference? Or are they bringing misery? Are they just taking from the environment, or are they regenerating the environment? Is there a discordance within the leadership? Is the board and the management seeing things in the same manner? There have been a lot of cases of infodemic where there's too much information that is probably helping. But one thing for sure that we have seen across the board is that it's much less about the knowledge of governance. but more about the practice of governance. A lot of us know what we need to do, but we are not doing them. Okay? Many of our corporate governance principles and procedures have been designed very well from a regulatory perspective with checks and balances. This was how things, were really done. They are good policies, they are good procedures. We have brought, even for many companies, good directors. But are we doing that which we are doing? Are the boards independent enough to make objective decisions, both in the short term, but also in the long term? Are they enabling companies and organizations to play in the right arena? Are they able to incorporate the issues that we have? If you look at, for instance, the population of Africa, we have a youth bulge. Are we looking at that as a dividend, or are we looking at it as a burden? These are all the thoughts that we need. The digital imperative, are we taking care of that? And they are all about environment as well. And this is why we must think with Confucius. Knowledge without practice is totally useless, but practice without knowledge is also dangerous. So we need both. And when we look at the effectiveness of boards for the future, then we must think about these 4 areas. Very, very critical that we look at strategy and business. We look at areas of innovation. How are we going to grow the value innovation? And by the way, you're looking at this from the director's perspective. What are the networks and connections? If you are a board, are you also looking at what are the boards are doing? The board dynamics, again, very important. How do we engage with one another? How are we committing to the strategy of the organization? Diversity, again, a key critical issue. What sort of people are we bringing on board? What knowledge do they have? Level of integrity. In Kenya, I think we're about this is chapter 6 of the Constitution. How, to what extent are we aligning to that? Issues around monitoring and risk management. Again, things that we have been dealing with for a long while. And so with that, as we rethink about board evaluation and governance audit, we must think about governance as a leadership. And there are 3 important components of that. Looking at the fiduciary, which remains critical, because whatever we do as directors must be in the best interest of the organization. And strategy. So these components, these 3 components of fiduciary, strategic, and generative components must be aligned together. They must work as a system so that there is no imbalance. That's where the future is. And when we think about fiduciary, when we think about acting in the best interest of the organization, we must look at compliance comparative. There's no doubt about that. We must operate within the law. We must be aligned to some of our constitutive documents. And a number of IOD trainings are designed to be able to help that, but also even to go beyond and look at membership. I've just been talking about board membership, the recruitment, the appointment, the diversity. But we also must think about strategic issues, particularly around performance management. I've just talked about CEOs crosshairs. There's going to be more emphasis on performance. But even as a board, how does a board set its own performance? There are many boards we have seen that are evaluating. They have their own internal evaluation processes, but have they set performance for themselves so that they can see and be able to review how they are doing against the organizational mission and vision? Are they committed to what they need to do, and have they put in place appropriate scheme of delegation? Are they thinking beyond the company being just a going concern? Again, thinking back about ESG, are they having blue sky sessions to delve deeper into areas, into some of these global agenda? Interestingly, the former president of Liberia reminded us that history will judge us by the legacy we leave behind for generations to come. This is why it is critical that it's not just about now, but it's about the future. And remember, the burning environment is that things are changing pretty fast. How are we able to take care of now as we also prepare for the future? And this is why generative component is very important. It's about global governance imperatives. How are we performing vis-a-vis other boards? What can we learn from others? What can others learn from us? It's not just about us learning all the time. It's about what could others learn from us? How are we connected to the entire organization or company? Do the company staff understand what boards really do? Or do they know boards are only drawing allowances? Succession management imperative is so important. Developing social capital within the organization. Jack Welch said that before you are a leader, success is about growing yourself. And this was interesting. When you become a leader, it's about others. This touches on succession management. It's something that we have to think about. The leadership imperative, again, quite important. We need to think about as a board, are you able to zoom in, look at the granularities, but also zoom out. Don't spend time, zoom out to be able to see the strategic picture. I've just talked about the youth. Can we look at that as a dividend? All right. And this is why it is important, to have such sessions that we are able to discuss a number of these issues and agree on how do we support, how do we help one another to be able to do our best. Ladies and gentlemen, that's really the end of just an introductory presentation to start the discussions. Okay, so thank you for listening and happy to pick comments and questions and reactions. Thank you very much. So I see George, Dr. George Kwedo, please come.
Thank you very much, Daktari, for that very good and very good discourse, extremely enlightening and educating. I think I'd also want to thank IOD, particularly Madam Titiana, whom I have interacted with in this board evaluation. Now, straight to your discussion. There is normally with these board evaluations,
right,
there's a tendency whereby many boards don't see it as a major part of their operations. And therefore, they go around their businesses, time in, time out, without actually doing these board evaluations. But I think it's important to emphasize the importance of this, because when you're dealing with state corporations or these governmental things, sometimes it comes as a routine through the top. But it would be good for various boards to be including this item in the board almanac, be deliberate, because of the great benefits that come with the proper board evaluation. And I would have wished that you talk a little bit about the methodology, and you also link the board charters and the committee charters in the importance of board evaluation. Thank you, Dr. Hari.
Thank you, Dr. George. I think your comment is really, really important. It's really, really important. I think, first of all, for many, whether corporates or different organization or, entities, as you say, this has become a routine. When you make it a routine, sometimes people do not get the benefits of it. I've seen boards where people go to meetings and they rely on just the management to tell them what to do and what not to do. They pick the allowances and out they go, missing out the importance of their function, of their responsibilities. It is so critical for that. And it is, you know, for those of us who are in board, is to be able to ensure that, and remember that you are there for a purpose. If something goes wrong, you are to be held accountable. And so when we look at the board evaluation processes, you will see, by the way, because board, one of the key things for you as a director is to ensure you have adequate policies, and those policies can guide the organization. And therefore, one of the areas we would be very keen on is to look at what are the policies that you have in place. What, you know, looking at the legal, legislative environment, are they aligned to that? Do you have a constitutive document that is aligned to the law? Do you have a good board charter that defines those responsibilities? Do you have TORs for the committees? You know, do you have a policy for appointments of board members? You know, do you have something on evaluation? These are very, very critical, so that at the end of the day, it is not just a routine, because, you know, there are people, and as I said, there are organizations that actually do internal evaluations, and you will find they never even set, you know, the targets that they wanted to achieve. You know, why are they there? So it is important what you're saying, George, and I think it is something that we need. So looking at those documents is just one part. But then we have then a framework. We have to look at the performance of the collective board, but also the performance of the individuals within the board. So if you're looking at the chair, how is the chair performing their function? The secretary to the board, how are they doing it? The individual directors, how are they doing? Are they effective? The CEO, and the interactions between those various committees and the various members. How is that working? So that as a board, the decisions that are made as a collective, and you can forge a good way forward for the organization. So those are critical, and thank you so much, George, for that input. Any other thoughts?
Dr. Fred,
Anthony?
there is a comment on the chat box.
Right.
Dr. Fred says, good presentation, thank you, and very informative. Wilson says, quite insightful and well presented. And then Susan Muniri says, thanks for the presentation. There's a wonderful tool used to evaluate boards in public service. However, the application of that tool doesn't seem to be applied in a manner that brings out the true performance of the board. Have you interacted with this tool? I would appreciate hearing your comments.
Susan, could you talk more about your tool? How is the tool? What are the elements of that tool? I think I've interacted with a lot of tools. Could you speak to this? Let's hear your comment on that, please.
Susan, you can unmute. Okay.
Perhaps I can speak even as we wait to hear from Susan. This is Meshach Joram, CEO IOD.
Yes, Meshach.
Thank you, Dr. Fred, for that very insightful presentation. If I got Madam Susan Muniri right, perhaps you could be referring to the tool as provided for by Mwongozo, because that is what is mostly used in the public sector. But then my thinking is beyond just having the tool, it is also a question of the approach that you use in carrying out the board evaluation that then will really help in bringing out the salient issues that as a board you need to be able to deal with. And the methodology that I've seen that has gained a lot of prominence globally in the recent years is the methodology that we've also tried to apply as the Institute of Directors, where we target to do not just a quantitative approach to board evaluation and governance audits, but you also have the qualitative aspect, where you are having conversations with the directors, and beyond the qualitative, you also have an opportunity to review the documents that support the working of the board and the organization. So the effectiveness of the process would not just rely on the tool, but also the approaches that are used to ensure that we get the best out of the exercise. Thank you, Dr. Ray.
Thank you very much, Meshach. And obviously, very, very important, you know, that all those conversations, looking at, first of all, you know, the qualitatives, you know, the discussions, as you say, looking at the documentation. So very, very critical. And then when you come to the quantitatives, where you look at very specific roles. First of all, as I said, as a collective board, you're looking at the various issues. I did highlight some of that within the model. You're looking at the general operations and practice. You're looking at how the board meetings are managed and the processes around that. You're looking at the appointment, selection. You're looking at the induction of board members. You're looking at the board structure, how they involve in strategy, the issues around information and communication. And then you look at then the individual directors. The chair, for instance, is very important. If you have a weak chair, there are going to be issues. So we have to look at the chair in terms of the leadership, how the chair is managing relationships and managing the board as a whole, how and ensuring that he's developing or she's developing an effective board, the relationship with other stakeholders. We are looking at the CEO, who has been delegated, you know, the responsibility of running the organization, particularly looking at the leadership and the strategy, execution, and again, even those relationships where you have a legal secretary, again, the statutory requirement, those are very important. So it's having that balance that you're able to have the conversation, but you're also able to look at individuals as a collective, but also as individuals, directors, to see how effective, you know, the board, and of course how eager they are to make improvements to the effectiveness of the board. So very, very critical areas. Right. Any other comments or questions? So this is quite well, yeah.
A comment from Rose Mwaura, very good presentation. Tari, would appreciate a more comprehensive session in the future. This is an important session. Maybe just to respond to that before we go on. Yes, Rose, we have a more comprehensive detailed 2-day program in October 5th to 6th. You can join that. It's a virtual training as well. We'll be able to get more details on the same. And then Susan, there's a problem with the microphone. I'll go to SJM. Thanks to the conveners of the session, very well articulated. What would you recommend for a board as a basic must-have tool in helping manage our boards, especially for us to include many who might not be professional board members? Yes.
Before you go, can I bring back Joram? I think that Joram must be very, very happy with that question. Joram, this is where IOD needs to shine, needs to provide good guidance to different organizations, to different companies. Do you want to talk about that?
Thank you, Dr. Ari. I'm seeing my director Elizabeth Chengo's hand is raised up. Maybe before I speak, I need to allow my director to speak. Director Elizabeth, you can unmute yourself and speak, please.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much, Joram, our CEO. I think just allow me to make an observation as we progress to answer that question. I would like to very humbly appreciate this wonderful presentation by Dr. Ochieng and all the members on board. Just a few observations that I've learned from my learning points. I think the emphasis on the governance issue in terms of structure, which is not new structure, the processes, the behavior, you know, and the managing of the meetings. I would just want to emphasize on the issue of conflict management, especially where it comes to fiduciary, as far as the board is concerned, but more importantly, just to make an observation of what Dr. Ochieng has talked about in regard to moving from the VUCA, much as is very critical, into the BANI. I think we all know that much as strategy is very critical, 95% of success is attributed to mindset and 5% to strategy. So when now we start focusing on the issue of resilience, agility, emotional intelligence, and there also comes the ESG issue. I think it's a trend that it's one of those global changes that are actually appreciating the fact that the wholeness of the board and the management is very critical to the success of the organization. And so I think it's a call to us, even as an organization, to start very seriously looking at those areas, especially in this environment where stress has become a critical issue. In our last meeting, I think we had doctors, and there's a lot of emphasis. I think our CEO will also mention about that in really looking at the mental health. So you're looking at the wholesomeness of individuals, physical, professional, emotional, spiritual, a human being as a complete person, not just the compartments of structures and systems, and expect people who are unwell, quote and unquote, to be able to be effective. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Director Elizabeth. And we really appreciate, of course, the support of our board and all the members in supporting and carrying out our duties and responsibilities. And coming to the question that had been raised about what would we recommend for a board as a basic master tool. At the Institute of Directors, of course, we support organizations in their various governance matters, but we also have to appreciate that even as we carry this out, organizations are all at different levels. And therefore, the various tools that will support any board would also vary and depend on the level that you're in as an organization. For starters, what would be critical for us to have an appreciation of is how is the board structured. Once we have an appreciation of how the board is structured, then we can be able to know about the various support systems that need to be put in place. If you are a board that doesn't have, for example, a charter that defines how you operate as a board, that could be a starting point. If you're a board that is already advanced, you have the charter in place, but you don't have specific TORs for your committees, then that would be the next thing that you want to look at. So the various tools that support the functioning of the board would be based on the level that you're in as a board in terms of your growth in your corporate governance, your growth as a business in terms of how you've structured your activities in the board, and the direction that you want to take going forward in your progression. One of the things, and among the many things that we do, of course, at the IOD, is when we do our board evaluations, we not only look at the local environment, but we are very keen to also have an appreciation of what are the global best practices. And therefore, our methodology in terms of evaluations and audits, like we've seen from our conversation today, tries to look at the broad picture and the contemporary issues that directors deal with. And we know that different boards are at different levels in terms of embracing some of these best practices. And so our call to all of us who are in this room and those who would want to engage is it would help us to know where you are. We can do what we call a basic assessment, a skills assessment, and then a basic assessment of your board. Once we have an appreciation of where you are, then we can be able to provide additional support to help you in that process. Dr. Ari, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Very great comment. And of course, very good input from Director Elizabeth. I like the issue of wholeness. If you are not in good health, you cannot be in good set of mind. And issues around emotional intelligence, mental issues, I think those are becoming increasingly quite important in boards. You want people who are feeling not stressed, to be able to articulate issues. And so that's some great input there. Any other comments?
We can give a chance to Momanyi Nyabonyi before we go to the comments.
Okay.
Can unmute.
Good morning and thank you. Thank you, IOD, for organizing this wonderful session for us to share skills and knowledge and
Is it my internet only, or we have it?
And specifically, it was clear and rich. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I think we have lost Momanyi. Could you check connectivity?
Momanyi, you're back?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you. You can.
Apologies.
Get the question.
All right, apologies for that. I was thanking Dr. Ochieng for your presentation. I have taken 3 key takeaways. First, the Bani environment and the need for us leaders or the directors to be sensitive and have better qualities or bring in empathy in dealing with day-to-day changes in the organization. I have also taken away the need for entrenching the practice of governance, not just the knowledge of governance. And for me, the challenge to me is to start by practicing what I know in governance and not just having the book knowledge about it. I also like the reminder to have performance targets for the boards. I serve in a public sector board, which I think for us mostly we follow what we are required to do by either our parent ministry or what Mongozo says. But beyond that, I think there is need for us to sit down and agree what specifically do we want to achieve beyond what we have instituted. So I thank you very much again once more for organizing this, and I am happy that I logged in. It was worth every minute of my time. Asante sana.
Thank you so much, Momanyi. That's great summary right there. I really love your last point. When you say, in many cases, people go into boards and they do what they are told to do. And this is why the issue of independence is so critical. Recognizing that you have been brought in as a director because of your skills, because of your qualifications, because of your competencies, and therefore able to look objectively at the direction that the organization needs to take. And many times we are afraid to, give our objective opinions because you don't want to rattle things. But remember, the reason why you are there is to be able to provide the much needed direction based on your expertise. So we should never be afraid to point out if things are not going in the right direction, just as we should never be afraid to appreciate when things are going in the right direction. So thank you for that, Momanyi. Yes, we go back to the comment.
Yes, thank you. There are 4 comments. We have less than 5 minutes to go. We'll try and rush through this. From Dr. Prescott Muhonza, very well presented and insightful presentation, Dr. Fred. In your opinion, what do you think we can do to achieve top-notch board performance and representation given the divergence, as you have noted, between the global practice and what we are doing in Kenya? I'll let you respond to that and then proceed to the next one.
Yeah, that's very interesting from Dr. Prescott Muhonza, who is actually a colleague, was a doctorate colleague, and I know very, very keen on issues or matters strategy. Thank you, Prescott. I think really when you look at the global and the local, you know, one of the things that we must struggle with is first of all looking at the whole issue around culture. There are jurisdictions that will not accept a number of things that we accept locally. Okay, we have been socialized, for instance, in a way that leaders are not held to account. We do not, and whether you're looking at it as at organizational level, or you're looking at it at corporate or even the political level, leaders are the ones telling us we are not holding them to account. And increasingly, we need to do that. It has to be a culture that people must be tasked to do the right thing. There are good standards, and we can learn about these good standards. We can be able to localize and domesticate them. But are we willing to take the responsibility and be accountable? I think that's a big issue that we must think about. But we must also recognize that in Kenya, for instance, I don't think we appreciate a lot the importance of boards. And perhaps it is because some of the boards are not doing that which they are supposed to be doing. They are not, out there pointing at things. But increasingly, of course, we are seeing a huge difference. You're seeing boards who are coming out and saying, no, this is what we are not going to allow to happen. And we need to see a lot of that happening. We need to see our local boards beginning to interact with international and boards in other jurisdictions. Very, very critical. But also recognizing that in this country, we have the informal sector that is employing a lot of people. We have the youth that are coming up with startups, and a lot of those entities are not structured in a manner that requires, for instance, a board. Could be a family entity. And I think even as IOD, the thinking would be, how do we begin to support such informal sector, such small entities in a way that they can recognize that a board leadership is important? How do we think about being directors, not just for the remunerations, but as part of giving back? Because when you're giving back, you are able to offer yourself to make improvements without necessarily expecting too much. There's a lot of changes that we need to see happening there. But, for the sake of time, I'll let it there. That's food for thought, perhaps an area that we need to delve into in our next seminar. Thank you.
Thank you, Tori. Sandra Njagi, thank you for an insightful presentation, Dr. Fred. Please share the material. Yes, Sandra will be able to share the presentation plus the recording to your emails.
Sure.
Does IOD have a platform for linking consulting firms to board members seeking out board evaluations? We have a pool of consultants who support us in this. You can be able to join this pool as well through our TOT initiative, Training of Trainers. I'll go to Rose. Sorry, that one we already dealt with. The next comment should be from June Kivinda. Is it wise to have the founder of an organization to be the chair of a board, or is it better to have an outsider who can bring in new ideas and sharpen the board? Dr. Fred?
I think that is very, very interesting from June. It is, really, really interesting. It depends on the stage at which the organization is. We have constantly talked about founder syndrome and all that. But because we have Elizabeth as a director, can I bring Elizabeth on board? I want to hear her experience on that and her thoughts. Elizabeth, are you still there?
Thank you so much, Dr. The question is whether we should have a different chair other than the owner of the business.
Yes. What's your experience? What could you share there?
I think in my view, it will depend on the business cycle stage. Initially, you may have, I mean, it will be okay for the owner to drive the business. The challenge we have with most entrepreneurs is knowing when to step out and get in professionals. Yeah, so at some point it will be important for them to take a back seat, and we read this all over everywhere where the CEO has, I mean, the owner has been sacked from their own businesses to just make sure that the business is sustainable. So because it reaches a point where things get complex and you need professionals to help, like setting the, you know, the relevant structures and bringing the skills that are required at that level to take the business to the next level. So I would say it all depends on the stage of the business and the requirement thereof.
Yes, yeah. I think there have been, and that's some really great input. And there have been a lot of questions, even away from just the founder, because a lot of those founders are also the CEOs, you know. The question is it important to separate that from the chair? It's an important question that we need to think about, because for starter, some of them will be acting as management, but they also want to act as at governance level. And so thinking through the distinction between management and governance. So there's a lot of discussion we have, and I think, Elizabeth, you rightly said, depending on the stage, for a lot of startups, you know, when family business, when they're starting, the vision bearer is the founder. So they want to ensure that this is headed in the direction that was envisaged. But at what point do you then leave and get an outsider who has bought into that vision to be able to take the organization forward? It's a very critical point there. Right. Shall we get the last one? I know we are running out of time now.
Yes, the last question from Anthony Mbadi. I like the word used, culture. Do we hold our parents to account? Sorry about that. Do we hold our parents to account, or as parents, are we accountable to our children? The smallest institution is family, and we grow this to other institutions. Think global, act local. Very well put.
Yes, I think that's really great final thought from my friend Anthony Mbadi. And Anthony, I know, has been involved in a lot of governance and board issues. And I think you have put it so nicely, you know. Do we hold our parents to account, or are we accountable ourselves? So really, because of the sector that we are in, because of the global environment we are in, we must stop thinking small. We must. Nelson Mandela said, there is no passion in that. There's no passion in thinking or in living even a life that you're much capable of. So thinking small is a problem within the board, but also generally speaking. And this is why I like what Anthony said, that let's think globally even as we act locally. Very good point to end there. So thank you very much, directors. Thank you for joining the session, and thank you for your input. We really appreciate you. Please get in touch with the IOD, you know, for any questions or any follow-ups, including some of these seminars and membership that may be very beneficial to you. Thank you very much. And back to you, Tatiana.
Very much, Dr. Fred, for a wonderful presentation. And to the directors, thank you so much for your time and the comments and the questions. For board evaluation, we are experts in board evaluation as well as governance audit. And we are more than happy to assist in this area. Before I close, I can also see Director Gideon Chengo is with us. Director Gideon Chengo, you can unmute and greet the directors for 1 minute so that we can close. Director Gideon, you can unmute and greet the participants. Okay, I think he's on mute. So thank you so much once again. Let's close the session with a word of prayer because I can see time is going very fast. Thank you, Heavenly Father, for the wonderful time that you've had. And we pray that, Lord, as we go to our different places of work, may you give us the strength and the ability to be able to perform to our best. We give you praise and we give you honor. In Jesus' name we do pray and believe. Amen. Directors, have a good day ahead and thank you very much. Once again.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And bye-bye.
Have a good
Bye-bye.
day too.